and welcome to another tutorial for the Minecraft Create mod, in which we're going to be making this little honey farm that you can see behind me. So this is a little liquid honey farm. What we're doing is we are drawing honey out of the beehives up at the top. That is being extracted through the pipework you can see just up there. It is then being drawn down into this little storage container, from where it can be pumped over to this little spout, which is then creating honeyed apples for us. And it's not just honeyed apples that this farm makes, it's also able to fill up honey buckets, and it'll make honey bottles as well, so you can use it for making solid blocks of honey if you're into your redstone. And also honey buckets, of course, have the benefit that it allows you to dispense honey over things if you fancy making things rather sticky and yellow. As well though, of course, rather than just making things yellow, it is also one of the main ingredients that we use to make limestone a little bit later on, making honey a really useful thing to have around. Another feature of this little farm is, if I just run around the back, you can see here it is completely early game. No brass has been used at all in its construction, and we can easily switch the thing off using this little clutch that you can see here, so that instead of having the whole thing running all the time, it can just be filling up your storage container for you with the honey from above. But we'll get into that a little bit more later on. Let's have a look now at how this thing is made. Okay, so everything we're going to need for the farm is in this chest. And as you can see, by far the most expensive thing is probably going to be the beehives. They'll be the most difficult to get hold of, but it's not going to run without them. And you're also going to need to get hold of quite a bit of copper, because that's what we use to move fluids around in the Create mod. And also some kind of building block. Doesn't really matter what you use. I'm going to go with ochre, just because it looks a little bit like honey. And the first thing you're going to want to do is decide where it is you want to store your honey. So you're going to need to place down your fluid tanks wherever that is, and they need to go in a 2x2 block, as you see, and they will automatically connect together to become one big tank, and this big tank needs to be 5 tall. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Then we're going to take our building block and we're going to come to the back part of this, still in line with the tank, so you can see just here, and we're going to make a little row of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And then against the last and the first blocks, we're going to place our shafts, which we will connect together using a belt. Just like that. Then you can hop up on your belt, and you'll need to place a little double chest at the start and just a single chest at the end. And then into both of these, you're also going to need an andesite funnel. From here, next we need to set up our spout so that we can dispense our honey, and to do that we're going to come right up to the belt without actually jumping on it. Then if you right click with your cursor pointing at the belt, you'll place a spout directly above the middle just there. Then we're going to use a mechanical pump, and we're going to come back over to our fluid container. If you just click it onto the container, you should see that it's got a little arrow that is pointing towards your spout. If on the other hand you find it's pointing in the opposite direction, it's pointing into your container, it's because you were crouching when you placed it. Make sure you're not crouching. Onto that then, we're going to add a little fluid valve, just like that, and this is going to give us the ability to control whether or not honey is going from the container to the spout or not. And you do that using one of these little copper valve handles. So you can just place that on the top, and then you'll find that what you can do is, if you can right click on it, you'll see the little dial that's just turned around to green. So right now we would be able to pump honey across, whereas if you crouch when you press on your little valve, you'll turn it back to red again, so now nothing would be able to pass it. From this point then, we can now come around to the side and we'll hop up on these building blocks, and we need to put a hopper going into the sort of back portion of this chest. Crouch down and place your little hopper just into there. Then on top of that, we're going to place another mechanical pump. This time it needs to be going into our fluid container, so we will crouch when we place it. So we can see our little grey arrow there is pointing into our container. Attached to that, we need to have a drain. Then attached to that, we're going to have a chest up at the top. So we just float up here, and then we can pop a little chest on, and then from the chest we'll have an andesite funnel. And what this is going to mean we can do is we can place anything into this chest, like honey buckets for example, that we didn't need. Maybe we drained them by accident, and they will go through into this drain, which will then push it back into our fluid container. It just means that we're not wasting honey in buckets anywhere. We can just put it back in the container. Okay, so that is pretty much all of the mechanical aspects of our contraption done. We have got somewhere to store our honey, we can dispense it onto any items or into buckets, and we can put any waste honey back into the system. All we need to do now is actually hook it up to some bees. And where you actually have your bees is kind of up to you. Easiest way to do it to me is just to put them straight above, but so long as you have your mechanical pump working, it will draw honey from the hives pretty much no matter how far away they are. But for simplicity's sake, we'll just put them straight above. So what we'll do is we'll come back over to our little fluid container. We're going to come to this sort of back right corner that you can see just here, and then crouching, we will place one of our mechanical pumps, and that should now be going into the system, as you can tell by the little grey arrow. Then what we're going to do is we will take our fluid pipes and we need to connect that onto our mechanical pump, and we're going to make a little grid of 6x2. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and then we'll just double it up. There we go. From there we will be able to just place our beehives directly onto the top, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a little cage around this first, just so that our bees can't escape. From here we can now just hop down inside our little cage and we can place our beehives down, and they will automatically connect. You don't need to do anything to make beehives connect onto pipes, it just knows that that's where they're supposed to be. Obviously just make sure that the beehive is facing forwards so that the bees can actually get out. And we'll just place one on each of these pipes. Once that's done, we can then pop down a few little flowering azalea leaves in here, just so that the bees have got something that they can forage from. And then, making sure I am close to my escape hole, I need to spawn some bees in here. Obviously, if you are doing this in a survival world, I would go and find bees somewhere else and get them already into these hives before you bring them in. Otherwise you're going to have quite the time trying to attract them up here. But in this case, I'll just spawn in a load of bees and we'll see how many manage to escape before I do. Up. Back in there. Oh, no, fine, you can live outside. But there we go, most of the bees got captured. If I needed to on a survival world, I'll just go in there and breed them up again. But for the most part now, that is all up and running. The bees will select which hives they want to go in and start filling them up. We need to just get this lot powered. And the first thing you're going to want to do is come over to where you've got these two little mechanical pumps just offset from each other. They both use a little small cogwheel in between them. As you can see, it's the little grey part just there. And so if we place one little cogwheel just there, so it's in between them, we're going to be able to power one and it'll power the other one at the same time. From there then, we can now come around the back. And if we look straight up, we can see another little cogwheel there for a mechanical pump. So we can place a small cogwheel just next to that one. And we're going to need to power this one as well, so we can place a small wheel just there. Then what we can do is we can come directly underneath this small cog that's powering the pump that draws the honey away, and then if we go to the dirt block or whatever it is you've got in your floor underneath, punch down by 2, and then place yourself a little water wheel just down there. Then if we clear out just a little bit of space, and we fetch ourselves a water bucket, then if we place our water just to one side, it will run past those spokes of the water wheel, and that's going to set it off for us. From there we can take our shafts and we can bring it up by 2 from out of that water wheel, and then we're going to take a vertical gearbox and we're going to place it on top of those shafts so that the power is facing in this direction as well. And then we can run this shaft right up to that cogwheel that's just right up at the top, and that will immediately actually start drawing honey into our container for us, so that should start filling up soon. From this point then, we now need to go and fetch a clutch, and we're going to place that just to the side of this vertical gearbox. This is going to mean that we can just switch the whole contraption on and off again when we don't need to use it. Then you can take an encased chain drive, and we're just going to attach it to the end of that cogwheel, and then we're going to bring it down, right down to the floor like so. Then you can come off to one side, and we're just going to punch away that little building block, and you can place a shaft just on the end of that belt. Then attached to that, we're going to have a horizontal gearbox. Pop a little gearbox just there, and then now the belt is going to be working as well. And it's walking in the wrong direction, that's fine. We'll come back around, and what we'll do instead, we will just change the direction that the water is flowing in. We'll bring it onto this side instead, and hopefully now, there we go, that is now running in the right direction. Okay, so that should be everything up and running. As long as you're wearing your goggles, if you look at your container, you'll be able to see how much is in there. So we can see we've got 1,333 millibuckets of honey, and a bucket is 1,000 millibuckets. So we should be able to fill this one up now. So if we pop our little bucket in there, it will come out, and then it'll go underneath this spout, and then it's actually not going to do anything. It'll just sit there. And that's because at the moment there is no honey in this spout, which is what this little valve was for. So we need to open that up. Now this will start to fill up with honey. As you can see, it is ticking up just there. And once it reaches 1,000 millibuckets, it will dispense into our little bucket, which is then just going to go off into our final chest. It will then fill back up with honey, and when it gets back to 1,000, it will be able to do another bucket. But let's just say you don't want to keep filling buckets, and in fact you don't even want that bucket, then it's time to turn this one off. Just so that it doesn't keep cycling through, we can take our bucket out, and we'll pop it in this chest up at the top instead. That dispensed into our little drain that you can see just there. The bucket then pops off at the front, gets caught by that hopper, and goes back into the chest down at the bottom. And there he is again, waiting to be dispensed into. And of course we can just take our little bucket off. Let's say, for example, if we wanted to just fill a little bottle instead, if you wanted those. Anything really, or an apple, just pop that one in as well. It will just dispense whatever the required amount is, and if it's not got enough, it will just sit underneath and wait for honey to refill. But only if you've got this valve open. It will now fill up, and as soon as it's ready, we've now got ourselves a honeyed apple. If you don't really want all of these bits and pieces of contraptions running, you just want to be filling up your container, what you can do is you can run round the back, place a little lever onto your clutch, and when you power it, so that it's gone a lighter shade of red to show that there's redstone in there now, you will see that everything has stopped on this side. Nothing should be working, nothing should be moving, but we are still drawing honey out of the beehives. And there you go. With just a little bit of extra decoration, you've got one little working honey farm using the Create mod in Minecraft. Anywho though, I hope you've enjoyed this little tutorial on how to make this little honey farm. Happy Minecrafting everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!